Welcome to the Casual Conversation, Wellness, Healing, and Healthcare with Daenerys, a podcast about healthcare through the lenses of mental health, microaggressions, and systemic bias. So come in, grab a cup of tea, and let's have a conversation. Welcome back to the Casual Conversation, Wellness, Healing, and Healthcare with your host, Daenerys. And in episode 1, we went over the introduction, things about me and my background and the reasons why I made this podcast, as well as what to expect for upcoming episodes and throughout this series of what we will be covering. This is episode number 2, numero dos. I'm learning Spanish right now, so any chance that I get to really speak my Spanish, I try to speak my Spanish. But this is episode number 2, and this is going to be a heavy one, guys. It is about experiencing loss of a patient. And I wanted to start out everything with this episode because I felt like it was a topic that was both non-medical professionals and medical professionals could relate to and empathize with. It's very heavy, so I definitely encourage some self-care. If you feel yourself, feeling like, this is getting to be too heavy, it is okay to pause and take a break, and come back to it if you want to or not. But I just felt like this is a topic that is not talked about enough in the medical profession. And I felt that it was a good one to really start off the series with, because it's something that happens every single day, is death, especially as it relates to in the hospitals. So let's go ahead and get into it. Real quick, today's tea is peppermint again. I don't know, the peppermint tea to me is just so soothing to my stomach. Like I just like it, and it's calming. I feel like got the incense going. Today's shirt just says emergency nurse. I'm gonna try and rock some medical shirts and t-shirts and hoodies and stuff for those of you guys watching on the YouTube version of this podcast. But so let's go ahead and get into the episode, all about experiencing loss of a patient. So oddly enough, for me, I do not have a specific experience as it relates to loss of a patient in my nursing profession, because I really feel like I process grief a little bit different than most people do. I have this ideology that in this human experience, which is what we all experience every single day, that everything is temporary and everything has an expiration date, meaning that nothing lasts forever, not even us, right? So knowing that one day I'm going to die, one day you're going to die, when people do pass, it's almost like I don't feel any type of emotion or extreme sadness, because to me, it simply means that your time has expired. Like, that was your time to pass. That's how your story ended, right? And so that has always kind of carried into my career, as it relates to nursing. And I just really feel like I never took time to really understand and process the amount of death that I would be experiencing as a healthcare professional. So we're going to start with this early story about when I was in high school, and I touched on this in the previous episode about how my high school had a medical academy, And that medical academy allowed for us to learn about different healthcare professions and for us to shadow at the hospital, aka clinicals. And I knew early on that I wanted to be an ER nurse. And so I was always begging to go to the ER. So this particular time, I went to the ER. And fun fact, this is a full circle moment for me. The hospital that I did my clinicals at in high school is the same ER that hired me when I was a new grad post graduation. So that's a really cool like full circle moment right there. But I remember in high school, I went to the ER and I was following this nurse. And she was in the pod that did traumas and high acuity, very sick patients, like very emergent patients. So your strokes, your traumas, your cardiac arrest. And for those of you guys who are not medical, cardiac arrest just simply means your heart is not beating. So you're dead essentially. And so us as providers, we do a lot of different measures to try to resuscitate you or bring you back to life. And she was in this pod, and I remember they got a call saying that they had a cardiac arrest. It was a Hispanic male, somewhere in his early to mid 60s, was working in the fields and was found down and, had been down for a couple of minutes before the rescue team, the fire, and I think EMS had pulled up as well. And so they brought him in. I remember being in the corner, I'm just excited, because, my only experience up until this point is like TV shows. So like the ER shows that came on TV, like cable TV at this point. And so to see it in real life is very exciting for me. So I'm like, okay, cool. And so they bring the patient in, they're doing chest compressions. I remember they get IV access, they're pushing medications, they're shocking the patient, and they're doing this for all of maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And the doctor eventually calls it time of death, so and so and so and so. And that's where I was like, kind of like, wow, like it was very anticlimactic. TV definitely dramatizes everything. It was very organized, I do remember for sure. But what stood out the most was after everything calmed down, the doctors left and everything, and the nurses were in there trying to clean the patient up, take off his clothing, and, finish kind of taking the inventory of what the patient had. I just remember them saying a lot of racial slurs. They were saying a lot of things that would be like disrespectful, and a lot of what you would call it I can't think of the word for it right now, but yeah, like they were just being very hypocritical, I would say. And so, for example, one of the nurses was taking like the patient's pants off, and the patient had a bag of marijuana, like a little small bag of marijuana, and she was like, oh my gosh, like y'all, maybe this was the culprit. And in his other pocket, he had like a little roll of money. It was a thick roll. And she was like, man, like, he's probably an illegal immigrant, and, he's not legal, so he couldn't go to the bank to like get an actual account to put his money in. Like, that's so crazy. Like, just a lot of just racial slurs, and it was just, I don't know. And then another nurse I remember was saying that, oh, well, he died doing what he loved, which was working in the fields. And it's like, whoa, like, me as a 16, 17-year-old is like, this is how healthcare is. Like, it kind of made me just kind of second guess and question like the practices and the respect, towards the patient that has, been deceased. And I don't know, I just know that it was very disheartening to hear those things and to see those things. But little did I know being 14 years, 13 years now past that and into my career now, that those were coping mechanisms. Yeah, coping mechanisms for the nurses. And so, with that being said, the reality of grief in healthcare and why it's overlooked is because it happens every single day. There's a lot of pressure to move on quickly in fast-paced medical settings, especially in departments like the ER. And I can only speak for the ER and a little bit of med-surg. But let me just try to paint a picture for you real quick, so that way you can see things from my point of view, just real quick. So imagine you're an ER nurse and you come in for your shift and you have 3 to 4 patients. And 3 of your 4 open rooms, 3 of those patients are stable. You have 1 open room. And you've just finished giving medications for a patient that's going upstairs, aka they're being admitted to the hospital. And as you're, finishing up all your tasks for that patient, they ask you for a blanket. And you're like, okay, sure. So while you're going to go get that blanket, you're intercepted by the charge nurse who says you have a cardiac arrest coming to your last open room, which cardiac arrests take at minimum 45 minutes to an hour. Minimum. And you say, okay, so that's an emergency, so you have to, stop what you're doing and go to that room and get prepared. And so you go in there, you help resuscitate, and if they survive, the patient gets rushed to ICU real quickly, and the ICU is for more advanced and stable medical care. And if the patient passes away, then you have to do all this paperwork, call the county coroner, depending on what's going on with the patient and how they pass. You have to body the bag and, take the patient to the morgue. Or if the patient's family, has a funeral home that they want the patient to go to, you have to call the funeral home and wait for them to come. So it's a lot. And you're doing all this with no time in between to decompress or process that loss. And so you come back to your other patients and you check on them, and they're all standing in the hallway outside their rooms and they're mad, like they're pissed. And one of the patients, are mad because you forgot the blanket that you promised them before the cardiac arrest came in. You see what I'm saying? So now we're like an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours past when you last seen that last patient, and they still ain't got their blanket. And then the other 2 are mad because maybe one, they haven't heard any type of updates for an hour and some change. The other one is in pain and has been hitting the call light with no response. So, you haven't even had time to take a bathroom break yet, let alone process what just happened, and knowing that these patients have no idea that somebody just passed away 2 doors down from them. But you're met with all of these emotions of frustration, of anger, and, maybe they're yelling at you. You just never know, right? And so it's easy to bottle up all those emotions and get very frustrated and get easy tempered, because you're having to put your emotions and your feelings on the back burner in order to calm these patients down and reassure them, get them, what they need, i.e. blankets, pain medicines, figure out what the doctor's going to do if the lab results came back, if the imaging came back. So, and you still haven't even been able to really address like your emotions of what just happened. You see what I'm saying? And I can assure you that happens every single shift, every single day in the ER. Every day. Every day. Whew. Yeah, that's heavy. That's heavy. Like you're not able to just take a moment and just take a breath. You're just met with just pressure and pressure and pressure. And so with that, you also have what they call compassion fatigue or emotional burnout. And those things can happen in departments like the ICU or the step down unit, which ICU is intensive care unit, which they take care of the sickest of the sickest. You also have step down unit, which the step down unit basically is the floor that's in between the ICU and the regular floor. The ICU, once again, is the sickest of the sickest. So you're not too sick to go to the ICU, but you're not stable enough to go to the regular medical floor. So on those type of units, you get a lot of patients who, you may have them for days and weeks and months on end. That's very normal for that to happen. And you're getting to know the patient, you're getting to know the family members, you're getting to know just everything about that individual and their loved ones. And during that time, you're establishing trust, and a bond. And, what if the patient is showing signs of improvement and progression? And, maybe they get to go home, or, maybe they get to go down to the step down unit, or maybe even to the regular floor. And then all of a sudden the patient takes a turn for the worse and they end up passing. And that happening over and over and over again, you're going to kind of get feelings of like, what is all this for? Especially if you know that you're working with the doctors and you're giving your input and you're making sure that you're going above and beyond for every patient to make sure that not only they're comfortable, they're being adequately taken care of, but their families are also being taken care of while they're there as well, like at the bedside for the patient, supporting the patient. So you can definitely get a lot of compassion fatigue and emotional burnout with that. And as well as the regular floors too, because patients are on the regular floors for months at a time as well. So I can only imagine like the regular medical floors, like how they feel, as far as compassion fatigue and emotional burnout is concerned. So it doesn't matter what department, what floor, what unit you work in. We all experience some type of grief, emotional burnout, or compassion fatigue. And like I said, just over and over again, just experiencing that, it can really make you just feel like, really, what's the purpose? Even though you know that that's not everybody's outcome, it can start to weigh heavy on you. And an example of how that was weighing heavy on me was during COVID. So I was an ER nurse way before COVID, but during this time, March 2020, when the shutdown happened, when the world just stopped, I was working in the ER then, full time. And I just remember being scared and just not knowing how things were going to pan out, because we didn't know what we were dealing with. We're working with limited resources. There's new information coming out every single day, and you're just like, whoa, like, I don't, really know how to take this. And we're putting on our protective gear, which is our PPE, personal protective equipment. And that stuff is hot. Like, it's hot. It's kind of claustrophobic, so you're doing that. And the way that people were coming in and passing and coming in fine one moment and can't breathe and having a respiratory arrest in another moment, or coming in with a cardiac arrest, or coming in with complications of COVID, it was just we were seeing death at a high volume. And dealing with that, dealing with the unknown, dealing with just trying to be in the moment and doing the best that you could do, there was no time for me to decompress. Like, it's just something after something after something. And not even going home and taking time to decompress either, because I feel like during that time it was like a hamster wheel of like work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep. Like it's just a cycle. Like the days were running all together, and it got to a point where I was starting to have like panic attacks. Like my chest would feel tight, I couldn't breathe, my hands would feel numb. And I'm just like, yo, like, what's going on, right? And so I started to see my therapist a lot more. Like I had to up my therapy sessions. And I was telling her all this, which shout out to my therapist, you the GOAT. I've been rocking with her for about 5 years now. So yeah, love my therapist. Love my therapist. But was seeing my therapist a lot more often, and she helped me to realize that the panic attacks that I was having was unprocessed grief or stored trauma. And if you don't know, our bodies store trauma. Like there's a book called The Body Keeps Score. And I've read that book, and it's just about how when we don't process our emotions or process trauma or process anything that has happened to us that puts us in some type of like survival mode, the body kind of keeps score, so you'll feel a certain type of way. And mine just so happened to manifest into panic attacks. And that was because I was going about my day in a hamster wheel, just sleep, work, and not taking time to really reflect on the situations that have happened throughout my shift, or after each time that we coded a patient, taking some time to go sit in the bathroom or to go sit in the supply closet and just think about, okay, everything that happened, did we do the best that we could do? You know, did we exalt all efforts? How do I feel about this? You know, what's my feelings towards it? What's my emotions towards it? And just everything just in between. And so over time, and with that being said too, even going home and not just taking time to process either, like just going home and just going straight to sleep. That wasn't healthy. And so with her bringing that to my attention and helping me to like recognize that, I was able to, I was more able to take care of myself and my mental health by having more self-care days, making sure that I talk to coworkers or journal or do yoga or just take time to just meditate on my feelings and my emotions. But yeah, that was a very, very hard time for me, especially when I wasn't processing, because I had to get on medications and for anxiety, and yeah, it was a hard time. It was a hard time. But moving on, I want to get into how you can cope with grief and practical ways that healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, patient care techs, anybody that's working in the healthcare field, and this can be applied to other career fields as well, how you can cope with grief and be able to regulate your emotions in real time. And some of those ways are to journal. I love to journal personally. My favorite method of journaling is to do a video journal, because I'm more of a talker, and so if I just prop up my phone or something and just get to talking, like I find that the words kind of come out more easily than when I write and journal. Writing hurts my hand, I'm not gonna lie to you, so I try to do the video journal. That helps me. Or I'll like go on my phone and turn on the voice memos and start talking on that, and that normally it's the same thing as setting up my phone and talking into a camera. Another thing that you can do as a healthcare professional is talk with colleagues, talk to your coworkers, talk. And For me, in the beginning of my career, just knowing like what I talked about in the first episode about how I was bullied, from that experience, I did not talk to my coworkers unless I needed to, for, teamwork or collaboration, things like that. But I just didn't talk to them outside of what was required for my job because of just my experience with being bullied. And so for a long time, I just did not talk to my coworkers, and I wasn't able to really let out those emotions in real time. So instead, I confided in my parents and my friends and, people who were close to me. And as much as they love me and as much as they want the best for me and were doing the best that they could at that time to give me sound advice, the advice just sounded very generic. And it was to a certain degree, because unless you walk in the shoes of a nurse or of a healthcare professional, you would never be able to really empathize with what we go through on a day-to-day, shift-to-shift basis. And so I would find myself being very frustrated with my parents or with my friends because what the advice that they were giving me wasn't nourishing to my spirit. And so it wasn't until I actually found coworkers who I entrusted in and that I felt safe with that I was really able to just really vent about how I feel about certain things in the healthcare profession as it relates to loss and grief and frustrations when you do lose a patient and other patients that you have just don't care or are being just inconsiderate of what you have going on, no matter how much you try to cater to them. So that definitely helped me out a lot. And I would definitely advise other healthcare professionals and nurses that, hey, when you lose a patient, when you just finish with a code, like if you need to take 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes to go sit in the supply closet or go sit in the bathroom and just cry or vent to a coworker, please go do that. Tell your charge nurse, tell your leadership, I need a couple minutes to just debrief, to process what just happened, because for some reason this is bothering me. And and I feel that they wouldn't have a problem with that, or they shouldn't have a problem with it. You should really escalate that if they do. And then of course, just finally going to therapy, finding you a therapist, going to therapy. It's 2025 and I feel like therapy is less taboo than it was, when I was a new grad. But go to therapy, and if you can, try to find a therapist who understands and works with medical professionals, because they would, they will more understand what you're going through than just a therapist who don't really know about the medical field. And also to self-care. I cannot stress self-care enough. And again, I'm the self-care queen. And I can be honest and vulnerable to say that I wasn't keeping up with my self-care regimen as I normally would, because again, you're just going through the motions with COVID. But take that time to go to that spa day, go on that trail. If self-care for you is going on a shopping spree, go on that shopping spree. If self-care to you is taking that weekend trip to a different city, go do that. If self-care to you is a staycation, do that. Whatever that looks like for you, make sure that you are intentionally having that self-care. Along with having that peer-to-peer support. So I just touched on talking with colleagues. Just to go back to that, just making that time out, carving that time out to find you somebody who you truly trust, or your charge nurse or your leadership, and just saying, hey, I'm really struggling right now. I need to vent. I need to talk, because you deserve to be able to be human in those moments. And a part of the human experience is grief and is emotional regulation and trying to regulate your emotions behind certain situations. So don't ever let nobody make you feel like you're a bad person or guilt trip you or gaslight you into feeling like you can't have emotions as it pertains to your job. Another thing that you can do is to create personal rituals to honor patience. So having those silent moments, or praying, if you believe in praying, or having some type of reflective practice. So if that looks like just having time to reflect over your resuscitation efforts and making sure that you did and that you are okay with doing the best that you could have done with the information that you had and the tools that you also had, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's also just reassuring that you are doing the best that you can do, and you can only do what you can do. You know what I'm saying? Also too, another way that you can cope with grief in the healthcare setting and profession, and how to protect your mental peace, is setting boundaries between work and personal life. I call this work-life balance. And those things look like not picking up for overtime. And I know that us nurses are bad about doing that because there's always something coming up, right? A birthday, a vacation, Christmas, something, right? That you need to pick up and go get that bag. I get that. I understand that. But there's a time and place for everything. So if you have a goal in mind, if you have to grind for a little bit, no problem. Go, Go do that. But if you're not in the space to really take on more than what you can handle mentally, do not feel bad for not picking up. And with that, if your leadership, like your charge nurse or somebody, is hitting you up, texting you, calling you, asking you to come in, say no. It is okay to say no. They will be okay. Because if you're always at the hospital, if you're always at work, you increase your chances of having and dealing with more loss and grief and just burnout in general. So it is just good to always just have a good work-life balance as it pertains to that. So it is okay to not pick up that phone or to not text back on your days off when they're asking you to come in. They will survive. They will make it. The patients will be taken care of. And I was guilty of that in the beginning of my career. I was always like replying back or answering the phones or feeling bad for calling out or something like that. And it's like, no, like the hospital is still standing and it will be standing when you go back for your normal scheduled shift. So don't feel bad for taking time for you, because work is for work and personal is for personal. So don't ever cross those two. And so now we're going to get into some ways that, or I would say some of the systemic issues that are barriers for healthcare professionals as it relates to grief and loss of a patient. And so because death happens every single day and you're painted to be this strong individual and you do get no time to decompress, I really feel like the healthcare institutions do a very bad job of creating spaces and tools to support healthcare providers during these times, especially during COVID. I think that as a whole, companies did a good job, but after COVID, it was like we went right back as if nothing happened. So what I mean by that is I feel that hospitals should do a better job of like offering more mental health services or counseling services to healthcare providers. Maybe having those free, or maybe having a in-house therapist to be able to call and, vent and let off and get out their emotions and feelings as it pertains to loss or what they have going on, not only at work, but at home as well. Hospitals should have, in my opinion, like a meditation room, a room where you can go and it's quiet, or maybe it's playing some soft music and you're just able to sit in there in silence and just meditate and just breathe and reflect and process without any type of distractions. I think that hospitals should offer more massage therapy services. So maybe every month or so, have a massage therapist, or give out some type of voucher, or have some type of loyalty program with some of the massage therapy places that are local to your community. And, you get a certain discount on massage services, or even in the hospital have like massage chairs where you can go and just relax and just take time to decompress, because those moments where you're able to just and just really let your hair down, take a moment to breathe and to decompress from what just happened, or even during your shift, because not every shift is smooth. Like some shifts be rough. And so on your lunch break or just on a break, being able to decompress and relax and take a moment to just breathe and, maybe get a massage for your shoulders get a massage on your shoulders from a massage chair or a massage therapist. That can make a world of difference, especially when it relates to your mental health. I also believe that we should have more conversations and make it less taboo in the workplace to talk about grief as it relates to in the hospital, like in your career and outside your career. Maybe you're dealing with the loss of a family member personally, and being able to come into work and speak about that and, just let people know like where you are mentally. Because if you're bottling up all those emotions, eventually you're gonna pop, and that's why I feel like a lot of healthcare professionals turn to drugs and alcohol and substances for comfort and pacification, because they're not able to really have that space or time or opportunity at work to talk about death or grief or just the mental toll that the job takes on, after so long. And fun fact, according to the National Institution of Health, the suicide rates for healthcare professionals are 16% for registered nurses and 13.1% for physicians as of 2023. So that's a significant number of healthcare professionals committing suicide. And it probably it's not just all with grief as it relates to the healthcare profession, but I think grief from outside factors and also the pressures of the healthcare industry as a whole, which we'll get into that in a future episode. But everything just all together combined just makes somebody like really, want to just give up. And one more thing that I would just say as it relates to things that organizations can do to kind of break down those barriers and more support the healthcare providers is having mental health days, or like a mental health day off outside of your regular PTO or sick days. Like I feel like every so often, maybe like every 90 days or however they want to work out those details, you should be able to take a mental health day or call out without any type of penalty in the name of mental health. Because again, we're all human. We're all dealing with something inside the workplace, outside the workplace, in life, at home. So I think that having that type of bucket outside of, again, your regular PTO and sick days will also make people feel more supported, to where they can take a day off and not be penalized for it, or say, oh my gosh, like, I need this PTO for this, or, I need to save my points because I don't want to get a write-up, or just stuff like that. And so as we wrap up this episode, I just want to remind you that grief and loss is a part of being human, and it is a part of the human experience. And to my nurses and to my healthcare professionals, you are not alone. I have dealt with it. I was able to, of course, get professional help to work through with it, and I still deal with it to this day. But my personal mantra is nothing changes if we don't change as individuals. So we have to start to debunk and destigmatize grief and loss in the healthcare profession, and being able to have open discussions about how you feel about a patient's death, or how a patient died, or how, that triggered you because it reminded you of a family member or something like that, without it being so taboo or being looked down on because they're expecting you to move on and take care of other patients, and just building a community around that. But I do want to leave you with this quote. It's by Jamie Anderson, and it says, grief is just love with nowhere to go. Grief is just love with nowhere to go. And for those who are in the healthcare profession, the love that you put into your craft is why you experience grief. Because love is an action, love is a choice. And the way that you're showing love to these patients is by taking care of them and, providing them comfort and going above and beyond in whatever way to promote their healing and to make them feel good in moments of vulnerability. And when you do all that and the patient still passes, it's almost like, wow, like just all that love and all that compassion that you put into your craft, is a manifestation of grief, because you have nowhere to to show that love anymore because that patient's not here. You see what I'm saying? But yeah, on that note, just take care of yourself, continue to pour into you, continue to seek out help if you need help, continue to have those conversations in the workplace and out the workplace. And just know that you're not alone, and we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. But I thank you for tuning in to this episode number 2 about loss and grief of a patient. I invite you to share your experiences in the comments, or send me an email. My email is in the link of whatever platform you're viewing this podcast on. Send me an email. You could be a medical professional or you can be a non-medical professional. I would love to hear your story. I would love to, have a conversation. If you're seeking advice, if you're just wanting to vent, if, you just want to share, I'm all open, and I am here and more than willing to have that conversation with you, especially if you're needing support as a nurse or a healthcare professional. And I just want to hear them. I really want to hear like how you guys deal with grief and loss of a patient or just of a loved one. Outside of that, just make sure that, whatever you're listening to this podcast on or watching this podcast on, if you're watching it on YouTube, that you subscribe. Follow me on social media. The links are in the bio. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. And I'm also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts, as well as iHeart and any other platforms for podcasts. You can find me there in the links in the bio. But this was a good episode. I'm not gonna lie, I was uncomfortable doing this episode because it is a heavy topic, but it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be talked about more openly, with more compassion, with more grace, and with non-judgment, because we're all human. We experience emotions differently, and we process things differently as well. But no matter how you process things, no matter how you handle situations, just know that you're doing the best that you can do as an individual. And just know that you're not alone. And I want you to know that it's going to be okay. And it's all a part of the job. Okay? So, see y'all next time for episode 3. Until then, sending you love, light, and healing. And y'all be safe. Peace.